Acquisition barriers. The experience with an L2 is fundamentally different from their L1 experience, and it is hardly conducive to acquisition. So when children try to learn a second language, the learning of the first language and the learning of the second language are two different experiences. They usually encounter this L2 during their teen or adult years in a few hours each week of school time rather than via the constant interaction experienced as a child. So the second language is generally learned in schools, and there are few periods in a day, sometimes 1 or 2 period, and the exposure is not as great as the first language provides to the student. So this is one of the reasons that why people find it difficult to acquire a second language. And beside that, the students have a lot of things on their minds. They have to learn many other things. For example, in an academic situation, they have other subjects to learn. So it's not the second language that is difficult for them. There are other things as well. With an already known language available for most of their daily communicative requirements, and more importantly, they have one mother language that is completely developed, that they can use for all the purposes that they have before them. So this also becomes a hindrance or a barrier in their way of learning a second language. Despite the fact that insufficient time, focus, and incentive undermine many L2 learning attempts. So the time, as we talked about, is insufficient. They may have 2-3 periods a week, and they have a lot of other things. Their focuses are on other things. They may maybe having more interest in mathematics or in other things. So all these things combined together undermines this experience of L2. Some individuals who seem to be able to overcome the difficulties and develop an ability to use the L2 quite effectively. However, against all odds, there are always some student or some people who learn language in a better manner. They can learn second language in better way. So here we have their interest, which prompts them to learn the second language. Sounding like a native speaker is difficult. However, so far as the pronunciation or spoken aspect of the language is concerned, it is very difficult for people to master the pronunciation of the second language, because here we have intonation, here we have pronunciation. So it's very difficult. Even in ideal acquisition situation, very few adults seem to reach native-like proficiency in using an L2. So even if a person has gone to a country where the second language that he wants to learn or he has learned is being used, he cannot come up to the level of the native speakers. There are individuals who can achieve great expertise in written language but not in the spoken language, and one of the greatest example is Joseph Conrad, who has written novels in English language, and they are very good novels. But whenever he used to speak, he had his Polish accent, right? So the accent is always there, which tells the people that the person is not from the same country or not from the first language country, second language country. This might suggest that some features of an L2, such as vocabulary and grammar, are easier to learn than others, such as pronunciation. So the most important thing that tells other where we belong to is the pronunciation. We may be able to learn grammar, learn vocabulary, but when we speak, people know that we are not the native speakers. Without early experience using the sounds and intonation of L2, even highly fluent adult learners are likely to be perceived as having an accent of some kind. So even early experience of sound. Even the people were sent to us a second language country in a very early age, but still their pronunciation tells other that there is some regional aspect in their pronunciation. This type of observation is sometimes taken as evidence that after the critical period for language acquisition has passed, around the time of puberty, it becomes very difficult to acquire another language fully. So it means that after 13 or 14 years of age, it is very difficult to master a second language, especially its spoken aspect is very difficult to master. The optimum age for learning is 10 to 16. So during this period, we can learn a second language in a better way. However, there are many studies which have other conclusions. When the flexibility of our inherent capacity for language has not been completely lost. So between the period of 10 to 16, it is supposed that our second language learning capacity is still with us, so we can learn a second language in a better manner. But even then, what generally we conclude is that the proficiency is not as good as the first language.